Joining us now on the show to help break down how exactly we end up with the police department policies that we do, Scott Morris, independent journalist. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here, and I very much enjoyed some of your recent writing in The Appeal about this company, Lexipol, that I honestly had not previously heard about. So for those watching who might also be unfamiliar with Lexipol, who are they and what are they doing?
Yeah, Lexipol is a private company that has been developing police policies since 2003. They've grown pretty quickly in that time, and at this point they are providing policies for around 3,400 police departments, fire departments, and correctional agencies in 35 states, and that's according to them.
And that's amazing. I had no idea that there was a company in that sort of space, but also importantly, while we know that they have many clients, we can't necessarily know individual police departments or fire departments that are working with Lexipol, is that correct?
Yeah, they won't disclose exactly who their clients are. They call it proprietary information. You can find out if your police department is a Lexipol subscriber, say through a public records request, but to find out the full scope of their reach is impossible.
Okay, interesting. And so in your research, what are some of the implications of having a company like this coordinating policy across many different departments across perhaps the entirety of the United States?
Well, it's true that police departments, it can be difficult to develop policy, particularly for smaller departments. What's interesting about Lexipol is that they build themselves as a company, not only as a time saver, but somebody that can protect you from lawsuits. And so protection from lawsuits necessarily doesn't necessarily have a good, it doesn't necessarily lead to better policing. So for example, if you're sued and something is explicitly forbidden by policy, then a court could find that you're liable in the lawsuit because the officer broke policy. Now, if the policy is more vague and doesn't allow particular or doesn't forbid particular actions, well, that means that the department's not going to be found liable. So you necessarily have a reduced liability in that scenario.
And so I want to get into the area of some of the things that they have been either pushing or encouraging departments on that hypothetically could run afoul of the law or the Constitution. There was one area that I found very interesting, which was them challenging regulations against police officers firing at vehicles, which is something that apparently, according to your reporting, some departments had sort of voluntarily taken those regulations literally decades ago, but now Lexipol is encouraging them to apparently fight against those regulations?
Yeah, so I mean, the NYPD has forbidden officers from firing at moving vehicles in most circumstances since the 1970s. And a few years ago, the Task Force on 21st Century Policing that was convened by Barack Obama, one of the recommendations they made was for officers to make that policy explicit as well, that officers should not fire into moving vehicles. And there's been different best practices efforts to keep officers from doing this, but Lexipol says that you shouldn't make anything forbidden basically in your policy along those lines, because they argue that at some point an officer you can't know all the circumstances, and an officer might have to have a reasonable circumstance to do that. But at the same time, this is something that best practice experts have been recommending departments take for decades, and it's particularly recently. So there's a conflict there between what these police reform experts are saying and what Lexipol is saying.
And as you point out, that sort of practice seems much more geared towards avoiding lawsuits rather than producing more responsible, safer policing.
Exactly.
And so I'm curious, Lexipol is operating in this space. Do we know of much competition in this same sort of field of helping to craft and coordinate policy, either from private corporations like Lexipol or from either maybe police reform organizations, nonprofits, or anything like that?
Well, there is a lot of nonprofits that'll make model policies available. The ACLU makes model policies available. Campaign Zero is another organization that's making model policies available. that is explicitly designed to reduce use of force in killings by police. And there's other private law firms that'll offer these kinds of services, help draft policies, consultants. As far as I know, no one has done this to the scope that Lexipol has. No one is operating as widely.
Interesting, and especially considering, how important that can be, some of the negative responses that can come from that. I want to thank you for doing your reporting in this area and following Lexipol and some of what's coming out of it. So Scott Morris, independent journalist, thank you for joining us on the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.